it's no wonder that 70% of change is failing
Mm,
when our leaders are literally just only able to see what's directly in front of them.
yeah.
And they don't have time for the big picture. So my feeling might be different than a lot of people's. I think it's the rare executive or person that asks someone else for consistent, constant advice, accountability, and perspective. So I think that sense of social connection and community has been an additional challenge for teams to overcome when they're trying to, either make change or just get better. We all have traits
Mm.
that are core to who we are. Those traits are objective. They're not meant to be judged. Some of us are funny. Some of us are visionary. Some of us are detail oriented, etc.
Welcome, Team ET, to today's episode of the ET Project podcast. I'm excited to introduce our guest, Mr. Wayne Barringer. He's the founder and the CEO of the Jaro Group. Wayne has a remarkable background in corporate communications and leadership, having transformed a 300-person creative team at Boeing, and I'm sure we'll touch on that a little bit, as well as summiting Mount Kilimanjaro. And we're definitely going to dive into that adventure more during our conversation. In addition, however, we'll discuss Wayne's insights on improving organizational communication, fostering strong team dynamics, and achieving effective leadership. So whether you're a seasoned executive or an emerging leader, I'm pretty confident that you're going to find some valuable takeaways from the conversation. And with that, Wayne, let's get started. Welcome to the show.
And I do a few of these podcasts, and I'm not sure I've had an introduction quite like that. I mean, that's very nice. I appreciate that, and it is great to be here with you.
Yeah, thank you. And you're sitting over in Seattle, I believe. How is Seattle at the moment?
Seattle's beautiful. The summertime here is paradise,
Mm.
and we just love it. So it's really nice.
I've spent some time over there, more so in Redmond, with Microsoft. We in my corporate life we partnered with Microsoft on different things, but one of them was a HoloLens. So I got to experience Seattle, so I can tick that off my bucket list. But very nice location.
As long as you're here between June and September, it's fantastic. Otherwise, you have to kind of take what nature brings. Which the advantage is we've got trees and lakes and rivers that you don't always have elsewhere. So we love it.
Yeah, no, some beautiful territory up around that area as well. So let's get started with the company and the story behind the name, the Jaro Group. What inspired the whole thing?
Yeah, well, I've been in marketing and advertising, as you mentioned, my whole career, and had an opportunity at Boeing to take a team that was really sort of lost and needed some help to get itself sort of righted.
Mm,
And we wound up being able to do that. When I started, the employee satisfaction was 52%. When I left, it was 90%.
mm,
A great team to help do that. But in the middle, excuse me, in the middle of that experience, I had an opportunity to climb Mount Kilimanjaro.
mm.
And that was a transformational experience on a number of levels. Obviously, physically, it's fantastic. But also from a leadership mindset perspective,
Yeah.
there was a moment on that mountain where I turned to a friend and said, wow, like we have overtrained for this. Like I feel really great. 20 minutes later, I stepped off the trail to get a drink and refill my water, and I almost blacked out. 20 minutes later, I just got very disoriented, where the vision became blurry, all the things that happen in altitude and fatigue and all that.
Mm,
Just then, the head guide of our trip showed up seemingly out of nowhere. I was like, it's time for me to turn around and go back. I can't do this. And he showed up and he took my backpack and put it on his back. And he said, Wayne, just follow my footsteps and we'll get you to the next camp. You're not turning around and we're going to do it. And 3 days later, I was at the top of the tallest mountain on the continent of Africa. So we'll get into all the kind of the nuances of that, but that's why I
Mm.
named the company the Jaro Group after I left Boeing in 2020.
Yeah, fantastic. We'll definitely dive deeper into that. As you mentioned, there's so many parallels, not just for companies, but for us in our life in general. I can imagine, but particularly from a change and a mindset perspective, I can only imagine it's transformational. I never achieved one of my bucket list items, which was to get to the base camp for Everest. I had some issues arise just as we were about to take off, unfortunately. But I can imagine that there's so much preparation that much must go into it. Maybe a little bit of background on Kilimanjaro itself. So you mentioned it's in Africa. Whereabouts in Africa?
Yeah, so it's in the country of Tanzania.
Tanzania. Yep.
It's very close to the equator, so just geographically, it's very close to the equator. So the weather is relatively moderate.
Mm,
But the nearest big city, if you can call it that in Tanzania, is a town called Arusha. And there's an international airport there. You can fly right there. It's about 45 minutes to town, and then it's
right.
about an hour to the trailhead.
How high is the mountain, roughly?
Yeah, so it's about 19,310 feet or so. It's the tallest mountain on the African continent.
Mhm.
Yeah, I see you're probably doing the meters calculation.
I was.
I should have done that first. It's probably what 6,000 meters or so, something like
Yeah.
that.
Okay.
Yeah, and so it's not like Everest where it's the death zone, as they call it, right up above 24,000 feet. I think is that place
Mm,
where you really can't do
yeah.
it very well without oxygen.
Yeah.
Kilimanjaro, there's no oxygen. There's none of that sort of oxygen tank stuff. Um, but the preparation is certainly a challenge.
Yeah. I would imagine oxygen is still very thin though, right?
Yeah,
When you're
once
getting
you
up
get,
higher.
yeah, I think that the day that I started this story off with it, I felt like I had overtrained.
Yeah.
We were approaching 15,000 feet.
Uh-huh.
And then when we just passed 15,000 feet is when I sort of got that
Right.
altitude sickness situation. So yeah, really over 12,000, you start to really
Mm,
feel it. And the higher you go, the thinner it gets. And you have to do some things to mitigate it.
yeah. So you mentioned you're halfway through the Boeing transformation. Where's the idea come from to go out over to Africa and climb this crazy mountain?
Yeah, I had the benefit and maybe the curse, but certainly the overriding benefit. I had a great coach that was helping guide me through the Boeing situation. I've always valued coaching, whether it was sports or business or other things that I just did.
Yeah.
I've always coached my kids, and I've always just kind of been that person that liked to sort of give and assess in that way.
Mm,
And that coach took 8 of his clients from around the
wow.
country on a rock climbing trip to
Uh-huh.
Joshua Tree National Park in California. And he used it as sort of a coaching
Mm,
ecosystem and a environment to get some points across. And one evening on that trip, he took us to dinner. We had a great dinner, steaks, and the wine was flowing and all that. And in the middle of dinner, he pulled out his laptop and pulled out a white, a slide projector and said, "Hey, before we break up today, I want to let you know I'm taking a group of people to Mount Kilimanjaro in the fall." Showed these beautiful photos, like just spectacular photos.
mm.
And said, "I'd like each of you to go. Would you like to go?" And of course, we were drinking wine and having a great time and said yes. Well, the next day I woke up, and you can probably hear my voice is raspy and my breathing is loud, and I have a small airway and things. And so I woke up and sort of thought, what did I just agree to? And then I just sort of, assessed it all and decided, oh, I'm not going to chicken out. Like, let's do this. Let's figure out how to do this. And
Mm.
so that's how I wound up on that journey.
Spectacular. We do a 3-day retreat over in Colorado, and we do a small climb around the Rockies, the southern end. So I can imagine the atmosphere, sitting around the campfire, perhaps enjoying a nice beverage. What was the preparation? You mentioned at one point you felt you were over prepared. What was the lead up like after you make that commitment before you actually get to the mountain? What did you have to do?
Did was I emailed everybody I could think of, all my friends that I've ever met, and said, "Hey, I'm going on this trip. Would you like to go? I'd love to share it with you." And out of those 30 or 40 people, one person responded yes. I strong armed my oldest son to go. My youngest son was just starting college
Right.
that week, so that didn't work out for him. In retrospect, I wish I had just said, "Hey, start college a semester later." But in the moment, so
Yeah.
I had a training group
Okay.
that we get together, the three or four of us, sort of work on it. So the things I did some running. I've
Hmm.
always been a runner. Certainly, I live in Seattle, and anybody who's been here or seen here, we've got lots and lots of places that we can go climb, not 19,000 feet, but
Yeah.
4, 5, 6,000 foot elevation climbs that really help get prepared. My wife gets embarrassed when I tell this story or when I did it, but I filled a backpack with 50 pounds and found the steepest road hill nearby and did lunges and hikes just up
Okay.
that traffic, right? So just try to stress yourself and eat and get stronger as best we could.
Mm. Mm. So what was the duration? Like, how long did you prepare for before the actual assault on the mountain?
Yeah, the drunken agreement to do it was in February and the trip was in September. So we had about 6 or 6.5 months to get ready to do it. And I definitely am a hiker.
Yeah.
I didn't have any equipment for anything like this. So part of the preparation was the equipment,
Yeah.
the learning of how to hike, what to do at altitude. How do you prepare for that?
Yeah.
What is the hike going to be like? Why is it 7 days? Yeah, so that 6.5 months was a massive education.
I can imagine. How much mindset preparation did you do, or did you do any mindset preparation?
Yeah, a ton. I think part of the mindset preparation is just getting over the initial fear that I mentioned. Like, wait a minute,
Yeah.
you can't do this with your throat, and you're this scrawny guy that I've never really climbed a mountain before.
Right.
It's really hiked before, but so getting past that was a big one. Uh, Deciding or having divine intervention to ask friends so that I had a group to train with and look forward to and help each other. That was a big one.
Yeah.
And then the third is just, I think the commitment to doing the work
Mm.
physically to get strong enough to where I wouldn't just tap out when I was there, even though
Right.
I
Right.
almost did that. I'd say those are the three big mindset things that worked in my favor for sure.
So as you're reflecting on it, and you think now back to the moment where you were ready to tap out, how did you have to work on the mindset? Step by step, I guess.
Yeah, so I think the at the moment where I was like, what am I doing here? And Boney, the guide, I still remember him to this day. His name was Boney, or that's what we called him, anyways. That's what he asked us to call him. Uh, he gave me such tremendous ease
Mm.
and confidence that he would help me get to the next camp, not turn around and go back. He didn't force me.
Yep.
He didn't convince me. I just felt it.
Right.
And that's the feeling that that really caused me to change my name of my company
Mm.
and really start to think about how does all this fit together was that moment. So my mindset was guided for me. And
Mm.
then after that, it was just like, hey, yeah, I'm going to eat and do the right things and slow down because part of it in altitude is if you go too fast, you know this, you've hiked in Colorado and around the world, altitude comes up quickly. And so the key is have a steady pace. And so I think those were the keys is he helped me feel at ease. And then I was able to kind of keep the steady pace after that.
What's the biggest highlight that you can recall? I'm sure there was many, but if you had to just name one, what's one of the biggest highlights?
I have never before or since seen a sunrise like the sunrise that I saw at the top of that mountain. We got up there right before sunrise.
Mm,
And when you're at the top of any mountain, at the very, very top, you can see 360 degrees. And so earlier in the trip, the one moment that I could still use my cell phone, I talked to my wife. She was that phone call that I made, and I was sort of emotional, like this is an amazing experience, and I don't know why I'm tearing up. And she said, "Wayne, you're on a mountain in the middle of Africa, like." And so that all came back to me as I'm looking over the east at the top of the mountain, just seeing the purple and yellow and orange and red and just for as far as you could see. It's just that was incredible.
mm. Yeah, I can only imagine. I'm envious, to be honest. We may have to talk about a next trip.
Let's do it. I'll hold you to it.
So let's transition a little bit. I mean, obviously, it was somewhat life changing. It shaped the company. How did it impact? So you're still at Boeing. How did it impact your approach within the corporate world?
Yeah. Well, the first way it impacted it is people got tired of hearing me tell the story. So that was, when you come back from something like that, somebody like me just wants to get it out and share. And,
Yep.
I still don't know anybody who has done it since I did it, but so I haven't been very good at recruiting, I suppose. Um, so that's one way. The next way is as difficult as that challenge was at Boeing when we arrived, it was 52% employee
Mm,
satisfaction. When we left, it was 90%. Um, the organization was in complete disarray structurally, functionally, technically, stakeholder perspective wise, and then employee satisfaction wise. It was very, very challenging
mhm.
as a business challenge to overcome. After Kilimanjaro, those challenges got into a different perspective. Didn't make them any less um,
Mm,
difficult, but far less daunting.
mhm.
And I think those are two of the big ones. And I think maybe the third is just the knowledge that if you
Right.
just take a step forward and just keep taking a step forward and don't worry about going too fast.
Mhm.
There's an illusion that we have to go so fast, especially in the West.
Mm,
And the reality is the most important thing is to be prepared and take steady steps and have a guide
right.
to help you see things you can't see.
Mm, yeah. There's so many great um, pieces of advice just in that single statement. You've mentioned a couple of times about the team, and I know communication's big on your agenda. The process of climbing the mountain correlated back to the corporation and the team environment, I can only imagine on the mountain must be incredibly tight.
I 100%. So
Yeah.
on the mountain, the most amazing thing, I've told you the story about Boney and the guide,
Yeah.
but there were more guides than him. And every day, so the law in Tanzania is if you want to
Mm,
climb Mount Kilimanjaro, you have to use a guide.
mhm.
And as a result of that, more people get to attempt it and more people succeed.
Right.
And so every day the guides would, carry our stuff and help us with whatever. And they would obviously hike faster than we did. And we would arrive after a day of hiking at camp, and they would greet us with song and dance and cheering and just unfettered joy. And these guys were just crushing the hiking every day in the altitude. And they still have the energy and the desire to just genuinely celebrate that. That's one of the things I try to take back. And I try to, I've never really been that guy to like just celebrate
Mm.
stuff. Just kind of do your thing and you solve problems and that's not a great way to be actually all the time. Celebrating those moments is huge. So that's one thing that we really took back and tried to just,
Right.
smell the roses a little bit more. And
Yeah.
we did that.
Fantastic. How do you communicate? If I think back to the pictures and the images I've seen, you tend to walk in file, right? In a line. Um, how do you actually communicate? Do you have two ways, or what's the communication process?
No, I think that, the line of people that you see really is correlated with Mount Everest.
Okay.
It's also correlated with the last sort of couple of hours of Kilimanjaro. Most of the
Mm.
time, you're able to kind of hike in a group most of the time. And so there's a lot of great conversations, a lot of great bonding and connecting
Right.
that happens on the trail.
Yeah.
And then when you stop to eat, and in the evenings when you sleep with your tent mate or whatever. So
Yeah.
it's more like a 7-day hiking trip that's very steep and very long and very devoid of altitude and oxygen at the top.
We may well be enlisting people as this conversation gets released. So very good, very good. So if we shift across to the corporate and we think about some of the challenges within the corporate space, team dynamics, communication, always two that are at the top of any corporation summit, if you like. Um, how do you go about dealing with those?
Yeah, I think that the team dynamics and communication are everything. If we kind of go back to some of the stuff that you asked me that I learned, one of the things I mentioned is I asked a group to go with me. A lot of times, what we see, well, first of all, let me tell you a stat.
Yeah.
In the US, 70% of corporate change efforts fail to achieve their objective.
Mm.
In one of the greatest business economies on the planet in the history, we fail more than two-thirds of the time to achieve big change. On Kilimanjaro, 70% of the people that attempt Kilimanjaro succeed.
Right.
The team dynamic and communication, I believe, is the reason why that is flipped. So on Kilimanjaro, we're always communicating. We have guides. We have colleagues like-minded going in the same direction.
Mm.
On the corporate side, as VPs and C levels, we think our job is to know how to make change,
Right.
but we've never really planned for or been trained to
Mm.
do that. So we haven't been trained. We haven't really planned for it effectively. We don't have a guide and we don't want anybody to go with us. We close ourselves off into a room
Mhm.
and try to figure it out ourselves. And there's this barrier. So all those parallels really come into play. And what we try to do, we help either with an individual through one-on-one performance coaching or with an organization through this sort of turnaround, change effectiveness and performance
Mm.
is to help them understand the value of a guide, understand the value of actually planning out this trek, not like you know what it is, but like you don't know what it is.
Mm.
So you can approach it with curiosity and then creating a coalition to advocate and go on that journey with you.
Right. So you don't tackle it yourself. And my own experience is so many leaders create silos in their mind as well as in their space with their teams, and they lose the alignment. And then the communication breaks down. They're all working in their own direction. They may have that common vision, but there's no one really pulling it together. And hence we end up where we are. Yeah, it's fascinating. As I imagine, there's so many parallels between what you did with Kilimanjaro and the corporate world. I think I read somewhere, and you please correct me if I'm totally off beat here, but you have this thing called the 1, 2, 3 on your calendar as a formula. What is that about? Sorry.
Yeah, so all of this Kilimanjaro stuff, all this change stuff is really what I wake up every morning wanting to do. I want to help,
Mm,
to increase the number of success. As I've gotten into it, what I've learned is 100% of the hundreds of people that we've worked with and coached and trained over the years,
mm,
100% of them, as we've started the engagement, one of the barriers for them has been time.
mm.
Wayne, I don't know if we can do this. I have 250 emails every day.
Yeah.
I have Slack channels and Teams instant messaging beyond the emails. I have my own texting and social media and whatever that people connect through me. And
Right.
oh, by the way, we haven't even yet talked about I have meetings scheduled back to back to back to back to back all day, every day.
Mm,
And I go home and have dinner with my family. I get back on email and Slack for an hour, and then I go to bed and I get up and I do it all again the next day.
yep.
Okay. It's no wonder that 70% of change is failing
Mm,
when our leaders are literally just only able to see what's directly in front of them.
yeah.
And they don't have time for the big picture. So we created the 1, 2, 3 own your calendar. And it comes from the premise: do you own your calendar or does your calendar own you?
Mm,
And the system is really simple. Take your calendar from last week, this week, and next week and categorize your meetings 1, 2, 3. Meeting level 1 is meetings you have to go to. You're contributing heavily. You're the leader or a big part of it.
right.
Double down on those meetings, prepare for those ahead of time, and have an aspiration and an intention
Mhm.
for how you want to show up and what you want out of it. I'm going to skip level 2. It's easier to go back to that. Level 3 are those meetings that are on everybody's calendars.
Right.
You don't know why you're going. You don't even know why
Mm,
you were asked. You tend to multitask during that meeting anyway. And then you get off the call and you're like, why was I even there? Label all those 3s. And then in between is a 2. And what we teach people is how to get rid of those 3s
mm,
and most of the 2s. And they're saving 3 to 5 hours of just completely wasted time a week. Our best client has saved 12 hours a week
wow.
just with a single exercise.
Mm,
It's not easy for everybody to keep it at that level every single week. But what we try to teach is if you have a mindset where you own your calendar,
mm.
as opposed to all the meeting requests owning you, you can then have agency over how much of that free time you have every week, as opposed to being victimized by it.
Mm. Yeah, very powerful activity. I can well imagine. Um, in my past life, we ran a intervention with a group, and we adopted how you can set the phone for random interruptions during the day, and we did an exercise where we identified when people were most productive, when they were in flow, when they were least productive. And we asked them to then go back and try and restructure their routine during their day. And obviously the meeting portion that they really were able to see and reduce um, helped them enormously. So I can well imagine the importance of the exercise you're doing. Incredible. I'm thinking about the mentors now and coaching. I know we're in this space, but how important, you've spoken about the leaders that took you on the mountain. How important is having mentors and coaches in your life as a leader not necessarily just within the organization, but in your immediate space, if you like, throughout your career? What's your feeling on that?
You know, my feeling might be different than a lot of people's. I think it's the rare executive or person that asks someone else for consistent, constant advice, accountability, and perspective.
Mhm.
And a lot of people that I come across see that as a weakness. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I know how to do this. I'm going to do it myself. I don't need help. And that's great. In fact, I think there's entrepreneurs like Elon and Jobs and Gates that if they didn't have that mindset, they could have never achieved the multi-billion dollar, world changing companies that they did. So
Yeah.
there's a special person where that works for. I think most of the rest of us, or let me just speak for myself,
Mm.
the perspective and the guidance when I was off track that mentors, coaches, and guides helped me with has been infinitely valuable. I can't even put a price tag on it.
Yeah.
I had coaches all through the Boeing experience. We had a game changing situation, a life changing for me and other people there. We had guides, mentors getting ready for Kilimanjaro up the
Mm.
mountain. And then we try to provide that for our clients now and try to flip that percentage of winning in their favor. And people tell us all the time they never understood how valuable it could be
Mm.
until they got into it. And the first day they started to see. And it's just because it's just a different perspective than
Yeah.
the 250 emails and the Slack and the back-to-back meetings. When you can pause and get a different viewpoint on that, it gives you permission to kind of see what the rest of the world looks like.
Uh, my own experience, and I'm fully on board with what you said, by the way. My one of the areas that we do a lot of work with our clients, particularly the more senior executives, is helping them transition from a 20th century leadership mindset through to where we are today in the 21st century. And it's that realization that we no longer have all the solutions, and we can't expect to have all the solutions. And that expectation that we brought with us through our career has really become the noose around our neck and the burden. And mentors, coaches, advisors really can help shine a light on that. I've my own experience. So I'm on board with you. Another area that's starting to become more prominent, at least in my experience, is this sense or the need for a sense of community within a team and within the organization and around you as an individual.
Mm.
Do you have a feeling on that?
I mean, 100%. I 100% agree with you, especially since COVID, where I don't know what the percentage is of business that gets done like this
Mm.
on Zoom or Teams or whatever. Um, Much more convenient and perhaps somewhat healthier for individual employees.
Mm.
The group dynamics are very different because we don't have those natural, spontaneous connection moments by the water cooler
Right.
to your office, etc. Now that's done all electronically, which means it tends to be much more transactional.
Mm.
And transactions don't usually create the kind of connection
Yeah.
that just a purposeful moment to connect can create, even
Mm.
if it's purposeful by happenstance, right? So I think that sense of social connection and community has been an additional challenge for teams to overcome when they're trying to, either make change or just get better.
Right.
Sometimes it's not about a reorg and a lot of upheaval. It's just, hey, we want to be, 1% better every day as a team.
Mm.
That requires the team to understand the North Star together. and buy off on that North Star. That requires the leader to communicate that North Star clearly
Mhm.
and in a way that connects with people, as opposed to, like you said, you know, 30 or 40 years ago, this is what we're going to do. Like, that just doesn't work outside the military very well
Yeah.
in the 21st century. So, yeah, I agree with you 100%, Wayne. I think that's really, really critical.
You mentioned the North Star there, and I'm just wondering, you prompted me to think, what are some of the factors that you experienced with Boeing or you experienced other locations in aligning the team and getting alignment between, let's say, the team's goals and the organization's goals and mission? Are there some key factors that you focus on when you're working with clients?
Yeah, I think the number one unlock
Yeah.
for that kind of connectivity between the leader and his or her team is the leader's ability to look inside themselves.
Hmm.
So many leaders. I used to be the leader. I have been the leader that said, I've said this to my team 10 times. Why don't they understand this? That is not looking inside yourself. That is blaming everybody else for perhaps your inability to tweak the message so that you're meeting those people where they are. And we do that by entering the relationship with a discovery exercise. We get 6, 10, 12 peers, colleagues, and reports, and we interview them. And then we reflect that feedback back. That's not a groundbreaking tactic. We've all heard and done that forever. But it is a groundbreaking result to help the leaders see things that they can't see, they've been unable or unwilling to see before. And we do that in a very supportive way. One of the things on Kilimanjaro, there's no judgment.
Mm.
There is no judgment on that mountain. Those guys they did not judge me because I almost passed out at 15,000 feet. They helped me. They supported me. They guided me.
Right.
As a result, I became a better version of Wayne than I would have if I would have tapped out and turned around and went back down. The same is true that a discovery process can create is that unlock that ability to have a guide help you without judgment, see where
Mm.
you can tweak so that you can connect better. We have the Jaro alignment scale. It's a more empirical way to do that,
Right.
but it's a way to open up the eyes of the leader so that they take agency and ownership, not just of the direction, but of the connection as well.
And if you go through that exercise and you identify that part of the issue, which is a large group now around the world of leaders who are feeling overwhelmed, they're feeling stressed, burned out, or verging on burnt out, inadequate, you might say, in their roles. How do you then go about supporting that?
Yeah, I love that question because that is 100% of the people that we talk to. Um,
Mm.
and 100% of the people that we work with, obviously.
Right.
The one, two, something as simple as 1, 2, 3 on your calendar
Mm.
is a huge unlock. Once they start to just experience that, like, oh,
Right.
I can squint now and see a little bit of light, even if it's just 3 hours a week.
Mm.
Because before you start, if you ask anybody, do you have any free time? They're like, I don't have any free time. I don't have any free time when I go home. So the notion is they can start to squint and see something once they start to realize that they do have a little bit more agency than they thought they did. The next thing we help them see is this is my belief, and this is what we sort of teach. We all have traits
Mm.
that are core to who we are. Those traits are objective. They're not meant to be judged. Some of us are funny. Some of us are visionary. Some of us are detail oriented, etc. When we're at our best, those traits are our superpowers. But when those traits, those objective core traits, are overexpressed or left unchecked if they run amok.
Mhm.
Those same traits are our kryptonite. And so if we allow people the space to see that without judgment and then want to learn, of
Mm.
course, everybody wants to stay out of the kryptonite. How do you recognize that and get back to superpower as soon as possible, as opposed to wallow and spin and churn
Yeah.
in the kryptonite? And then the third is, okay, we've got you a little bit of space in your calendar. Okay, we've got you feeling balanced about what you do well and how you can recognize getting back to that. Who's the leader you want to become?
Mm.
100% of the people we work with, when I ask them, have you ever thought about the leader you want to become? They say, well, I want a raise or a promotion. No, that's not what I'm talking about. How do you want to show up with intentionality? Once they start to realize that, oh, I have permission to do that, the walls start to really come down.
Mm.
And they really start to engage in, helping themselves be better and then aligning better with their team so their teams can be better. And they can align better with their bosses too, which is a huge factor that we haven't talked about, but is probably the key factor for their ability to be successful too.
Well, what I like about what you just said then is um, what we see is people get so caught up doing the doing, they get so lost in the forest, and having that ability to step back and to look beyond, to actually understand that, hey, I'm just going through the motions here, fighting the fire day on day, and I'm forgetting about the bigger picture. And being able to step back and take that perspective really helps to reshape that mindset and opens possibilities, like you mentioned. So I really like that. Um, we're getting tight on time, and I have so many more questions I would love to send through. But I'm curious about, you mentioned COVID, and we all know it was a major transformation and transitioning period. One of the biggest areas that I see is the way that we communicate. And you alluded to that already when you were talking about the virtual communication. How did you and your group pivot in that situation?
Well, we try to be very conscientious
Mhm.
about learning how to communicate online.
Mhm.
So before COVID, we were on WebEx like twice a year, maybe, or something. And it was usually
Right.
one way, right? One to many, or conference calls. Like this wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
So we had to educate ourselves on some of the best practices while everyone was sort of learning together.
Mm.
So that was one thing. Um, and I would say that early on we were probably not very good. We probably are a lot better now is probably a better way to say it. I think after all of the restrictions and more normalcy sort of came to the stage in late 2022 or so, we tried hard to get back in person as much as possible.
Mm.
And so we really doubled down on in person, but certainly your clients are all over the world. Mine are all over the US right now.
Yeah.
You can't just be flying all the time. So I think the combination of in person still matters.
Mhm.
And we've been attentive to how to do better virtually. I think those are the two things that have helped us the most. We've had the intention of bridging those two pieces.
Yeah, yeah, which is excellent suggestion. I like what you said earlier about it became very transactional, and we lost that ability to create the relationship that we used to build through the water cooler conversations. And I think this has really added to the burden of leadership over this period, and it's just been an extra weight on leaders' shoulders, and many of them haven't made that transition still today, in my mind, and this is really weighing them down. Which is the segue into the final question I had related around this, which is self-care
Mm.
and trying to strike that balance. Whether you're looking for work-life balance, whether you're looking to synergize between both, whatever it is, what's your experience with leadership and finding how to create self-care as a leader?
And I love that question. And I'll try to keep it short because I know we're on time. But we have a whole new podcast on just this.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was the kind of person, and many leaders are, where you think that you don't deserve self-care.
Mm,
My responsibilities are to everybody else first. And then I'm so exhausted from all that. I'm just going to veg in front of the TV or
yeah.
go to sleep or whatever. A lot of people have exercise, right? So that's part of what some people do to create self-care. But that's just the beginning, in my view, or at least it
Mm,
was for me. For me, self-care is the simplest notion that we've all heard of if you've ever been on a plane. You got to put the mask on you before you put it even on your child next to you.
yeah.
And the whole idea is being open to what self-care actually truly is. There's exercise. Is that self-care? Well, in my view, it's an element of, it's not the whole piece.
Yeah.
So that's how we really look at it. That's how we try to help people see it. And again, we go right back to the very first thing that we roll out. If you can have agency over your time,
Mm,
then you can schedule self-care into your time until you create the habit where you don't have to schedule it anymore. So
mm,
that's kind of how we look at it. That there's a whole list of things that we teach and do,
yeah.
but that's the generalities.
Yeah, no, it's a huge question. It's a very prominent topic right at the moment. So thank you for that. Are there any trends that you see emerging through your contact with your clients? Let's say around the area of communications, do you see us communicating differently in the future? Do you see the team dynamic evolving differently in the future?
I think one of the things that we try very hard to affect in that regard is as siloed as the communication is today,
Mm,
almost to the individual, but certainly, a lot of leaders think their job is to fortify and protect their teams.
mm,
One of the things that we see happening more and more, and it's one of the things we teach, is establishing shared goals. Like I think we all know that trust, if you think about trust is created when you do what you say you're going to do.
right.
And when you communicate that back to the person you're trying to create trust with. But
Yeah.
if you both don't agree on what you should be doing or what that shared goal is, you're going to go off and do something that you both think is divergent.
Mm,
We're seeing that happen with individuals and teams all over corporate America, all of our clients today, every one of them. So that notion of stopping, and now you've got some time in your calendar to create a shared goal. Not, I've had clients come back and say, Wayne, I created shared goals. I told my stakeholder what the shared goal is. Okay, that's a first step. They're aware of it at least now. But because you're laughing, that's not a shared goal. So I think that's a big piece to repeat back what your stakeholder is saying. Ask them if you've got it right. Ask them, great, I understand that. Here's my constraint. I want to help you. Here's where I have a constraint. Can you help me get past that? Great. Now we have a shared goal. Let's go do that. I don't see that happening naturally very, very often. And we're trying really hard to make that a key tenet going forward.
very nice. So what's the future for the Jaro Group? Where's your focus? Are you working on books or new programs, or what's the future look like?
I need to get out of my own way and get a book written. I keep thinking about that. My mom actually bought me a book on how to publish her first, and I read it and then I didn't do anything about it. So I probably should do that someday. I think what we're trying to do now is, my background is marketing and advertising. We work with a lot of marketing and advertising teams.
Mhm.
The last year or so, we've started to work with more operations teams, finance teams, customer relations teams. So what we're finding is the stuff we're talking about is not just for marketers. It's for anybody in a corporate environment. So we're going to be branching out more broadly and trying to connect with those other functional areas and not just let the marketers have more impact, efficiency, and joy, but have everybody do that.
Yeah, yeah, very nice. Wayne, some great insights coming out of this conversation. Thank you for that. Where can people find you and connect with you if they'd like to know more?
Yeah, thank you. Uh, I have LinkedIn. It's Wayne Barringer on LinkedIn.
Mhm.
Jaro Group has a website. It's jaro.win. So JARO.WIN. We want people to win. And then you can email me, wayne@jaro.win. And we're super
Perfect.
happy to chat with anybody, have general conversations. We don't charge for any of that up front. And
Mm.
just love to hear from folks and make connections and see how we can help.
Yeah, excellent. We'll link to all that in the show notes, of course. And Wayne, great connecting. Love listening to your story around Kilimanjaro. We'll probably have to talk more about it, about the rerun of the assault. But thanks for being on the ET project. Been fantastic, and hope you enjoyed.
Thank you, Wayne. Loved it very much. Thank you.
So what are you waiting for? Hit the subscribe button below and click on the bell icon so I can pop up in your feed occasionally with a great tip for your ultimate growth.